Hello everyone, I'm Michaela Kathleen and I'm here today with a video called All of the Books I Would Have If I Wasn't a Booktuber. I first saw this over on Haley and Bookland's channel, but I think a few booktubers have done it, and I think it was originally inspired by the beauty YouTubing community, in which they talked about the makeup they would have if they weren't beauty influencers. Although, much like Haley, I would pretty much have all of the books that I have even if I wasn't a booktuber, especially because I don't get sent unsolicited books. But how Haley did it on her channel was she just kind of picked her top 3 books from each genre. And so I'm going with that method. So these are my favorite genres and the books that I would absolutely have to have from those genres, no matter what. So I figured I would start off with my top 2 most favorite genres, which are fantasy and contemporary YA. So the 3 fantasies that I would have to own no matter what, and I will note I'm counting series as one book. I don't care if that's cheating, but one would obviously be the Harry Potter series. This is my favorite series of all time. These are the books that got me into reading. They're pretty much the only books where I own more than one edition for some of the books. And yeah, I could never part from these. Next, I have The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. This is another childhood classic for me. I just reread these last year, maybe the year before, and I loved rereading them so much. They're still a top favorite that I could never get rid of. And finally, the first standalone I'm going to be talking about is Tiger Lily by Jodi Lynn Anderson. This book is just so atmospheric and so like lyrical and poetic and such a beautiful read. I love it so much. It is a Peter Pan retelling from the perspective of Tiger Lily, and it reads quite a bit older than most Peter Pan retellings. And I just love Tiger Lily so much as a character, and I love this story so much. So now moving on to my other top genre, which is contemporary YA. And again, starting with the obvious here, we have The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. This, again, is the book that got me into contemporary YA, much like Harry Potter is the book that got me into reading in general. John Green is my favorite author, and so I definitely would have to keep The Fault in Our Stars. And parting with An Abundance of Catherines would also be quite difficult, but it didn't make this list of 3. One that did make the list was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This book I just have such a specific personal connection to because I have so much in common with the main character. I have never read a character before this that made me feel like I was almost reading about myself, and so this book holds a special place in my heart. And finally, for contemporary YAs, I have Kids of Appetite by David Arnold. Again, this is another one that the writing is just so beautiful. I love the way David Arnold expresses his ideas in this book. It's kind of a found family story, which I love. Found family is my favorite trope. It's got an interesting twist because it's contemporary YA, but it's also kind of mixed in with a mystery. So I just love all the characters and I love the book so much. My third most read genre is probably dystopian, which is kind of as close as I get to science fiction, I feel. And my number 1 favorite dystopian is The Last Book in the Universe by Rodman Philbrick. This is like one of the first books that I read on my own after reading Harry Potter. And so, of course, it is just a lifelong favorite for me. It's probably my 2nd favorite book of all time. It's very short, so I reread it a lot. I probably have read this book more times than any other book in my life. This is kind of my comfort read because it is so short and easy to read, and it's been in my life for so long. Next, I have Uglies by Scott Westerfeld, which of all the kind of YA dystopians that came out around the same time, this one is my favorite. It is such a fun read. It's so full of adventure and action, and I am so excited that it is coming to Netflix hopefully this year. This is definitely my favorite dystopian series since The Last Book in the Universe is just a standalone. And then finally I have, of course, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is definitely the most popular dystopian series, I would say, and it's definitely Very good, has lots of great messages, very well written. It is also very action-packed, but a lot more like serious action, whereas Uglies is a lot more like fun action, I would say. But I do definitely love this one as well, and could not go without it. Next, moving on to some genres that I don't read as much, but I did feel I would definitely want to keep some books from these genres. One of those being nonfiction, which I do not read very often, but I do have some that I really enjoy. One of those being Quiet by Susan Cain, which this is a nonfiction about introverts and how they are undervalued and not taken into account enough. This is one that I identified with strongly as an introvert myself. Another book kind of like Fangirl that just made me feel seen. So this one was a really enjoyable nonfiction for me. Next I have Yes Please by Amy Poehler. This one was just such a fun, interesting read. It was really engaging. I can sometimes be kind of bored by nonfiction, even celebrity memoirs, and this one was not boring at all. And then finally I have Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, which again was just so well done, very engaging, very important topics being handled. This one is a pretty recent read, but I really enjoyed it and I really wanted more. Like, I want another one that focuses more on his life as he starts to gain success as a comic, because this one focused on his early years in South Africa, and it was so well done that I want more. Next, I have some children's books, and for that I have another lifelong favorite, and that is Princess Academy by Shannon Hale. This one, much like Tiger Lily, has such vibes and such atmosphere, very different vibes and atmosphere. This one is just so warm and cozy and homey and sweet, and it's got just a little touch of fantasy, and Shannon Hale has created a really unique world in this book of this mountain community that is very secluded and very tight-knit. And again, this is a childhood classic for me. Next I have Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, which everybody knows Peter Pan. I already had a Peter Pan retelling on this list. And yeah, this is where it all started with Peter Pan. I didn't actually like this one the first time I read it, which the first time I read it, I just read it on the internet because you can read it on the internet for free. But I later ended up rereading it and was really confused about why I didn't like it the first time I read it, and immediately went out and bought it because I fell in love on the second read. And now I could not be without it. And finally, for children's books, I have Wonder by R.J. Palacio, which is more middle grade, but I'm considering it a children's book. And again, this one is just so sweet. I like all the sweetness in the children's books. Our main character, Augie, is so wonderful. His entire family is so great. And I feel like we don't get a lot of that in books. Like, it's a lot of found family and friendships. But I feel like a lot of times in books you don't get to see parents especially, and so this one's really great that it has this really nice family unit. And the final genre I kind of mashed up just kind of historical fiction slash adult fiction, and for these I have The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak, which is one of my top 10 favorite books of all time. It is by far my favorite historical fiction. I think it was such an interesting and great choice to have the book be narrated by death. It is a World War II historical fiction, and it is a book that loves books, and I just love it. Next, I have another World War II historical fiction, and that is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. This book is just so subtle because it is told from a child's perspective, and so our main character doesn't necessarily always know what's going on around him, and so as the reader you kind of know what's going on, but it's being delivered in this really subtle way since it's through the eyes of a child, and it is also a very heartbreaking read. And finally I have A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman, which is not historical fiction, it's just an adult fiction. But this one is about a curmudgeonly old man who's kind of learning to open his heart again, and it is so sweet, so heartwarming, I love Uva, the main character, so much, and I really love Frederick Bachman's writing. So yeah, these are all of the books that I would own if I wasn't a booktuber, or if I was for some reason forced to get rid of most of my books and was able to hold on to some favorites. Let me know down below some of the books that you just could not do without. I hope you enjoyed watching, and now on to the quote for today's video, which today I have a short one from Graydon Carter, and it goes, "Life is not a dress rehearsal." Thanks for watching. Remember, words matter.